Welcome, everyone, once again to the spoiler room. It is our last episode of She's Dietrich-iest. And we're just it's one of those things where this one isn't really
A movie. Yeah, go on.
it's a movie. It's not really starring Marlene Dietrich, though she does make an appearance here. So yeah, I bear with me just one moment, folks. There's an error popping up here because of course there is, because they don't even want Twitch doesn't even want us to talk about this film tonight. That's not a good sign, man. Uh
It shows that they have taste.
It shows that they have taste. Yeah, something like that. But tonight, thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and popping your favorite drink, folks, with us as we talk movie spoilers. And yeah, this is going to be an interesting film. It's got David Bowie in it, and it has Marlene Dietrich doing two scenes in it, much like Touch of Evil. Okay, it still qualifies because she's in it, all right? And this was her last film. Okay, so it's one of those things where I wanted to cover it because it was the last official screen appearance of her on the big screen. So let's see if it. Oh yeah, Twitch. I guess we're not going to have it on Twitch tonight. But with me tonight though is the one and only right hand man. He keeps coming back for more, though. I know tonight he's probably questioning his life's choices, including this one, which is Mr. Ian Simmons. How you doing, Ian?
I'm doing great because I realized that we could have been saddled with talking about the 2 hour and 27-minute version of this film. Tonight we're just going to talk about the 145.
Yeah, it's a 145 one, so it's not as long. So there's that.
I can't imagine watching a 2 hour and 27-minute version of this movie. I know why this was Marlene Dietrich's last film. It's because after it was over and she saw it, she was like, I don't want to live anymore. That's my hypothesis.
Wow. Wow. Well, there you Ian, go ahead, give a synopsis of this film.
I would love to, Mark, but I think I've discovered a new condition. I've had a lesser version of it before, but I'm calling it filmnesia. It's where you're watching a movie. It's where you're watching a movie and you forget about it as it's happening.
Wow.
I know David Bowie plays a German lieutenant in World War I, and he gets blown up and spends some time in a French hospital recovering. He makes his way back home, and he ends up becoming a gigolo, and he's the burgeoning Nazi party is trying to recruit him to become a frontman for them, but he doesn't want to do it. And there's this girl who's interested in him, and she's a performer, and that's about where I left off. I watched the whole thing.
You did watch the whole thing. Well, that's good.
Yeah, but I couldn't tell you anything beyond that, except there's some singing, there's some dancing. He dies at the end, and they bury him in a Nazi uniform in a big ceremony because he didn't want to join up with the Germans, in those kinds of Germans, but they wanted him. So when he's shot dead in the street, they appropriate his body and try and make him into a post-mortem martyr, if such a thing exists.
Yeah, man, this film's weird. I mean, it's David Bowie, so yeah, it's gonna be. But we open with David Bowie as Paul Ambrosius von Pirchgodsky, Przgodzki. Thank you. My Polish relatives have now rolled over in their graves because I've mispronounced that. But we get introduced to him, and we're like, okay. And now everybody's talking in a British accent, but they're apparently Germans.
Yeah. We're unfortunately in this era where it's hard to tell what's going on, because at first I'm like, is he a spy, or why is nobody like picking up on this? But no, it's just much like Kevin Costner and Robin Hood. He couldn't be bothered to try an accent, and no one was gonna tell David Bowie, hey, you got to try harder.
Yeah, well, everybody else for that matter. Nobody's doing a
I
German
think he's got the
accent.
tone right. Yeah.
Except you've got Marlene Dietrich. Well, she naturally has an accent, so of course she will have her German. But it was like, I was like, okay, is he a British soldier that he's walking along the trench like this? And no, they're trying to show that he's like this cold, well-trained soldier that is not phased by the explosions going on around him. And he meets his commanding officer, and suddenly they see the Allies in the trenches cheering because they say the war is over. But they're like, no, it's not. So they go rushing out into the no man's land, and there's an explosion. And then it's like, what, like 2 or 3 years later, he's been in a coma or something in France, and the French think he's some French war hero, and he wakes from the coma and he speaks supposedly in German or whatnot. And they're like, what the hell? It just gets weirder from there.
I think this movie is supposed to be a comedy or something.
Yes, yeah, it's supposed to be a comedy. I've gotten that it is supposed to be a comedy, at least in the beginning. I mean, not YouTube, IMDb tags it as a drama, but at least the first 20 minutes of this is all comedy until he gets to Berlin at some point carrying a pig that he somehow got from somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was like I'm watching this film going, when is something actually going to happen?
When's he gonna become a gigolo? That happens like after the hour mark.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, it's called Just a Gigolo. Okay, and you reach a point where he's trying to get odd jobs, and you're like, okay, here's where he becomes a gigolo. No, he's becoming an ad man walking around in a big bottle. Oh, yeah, that is the second job. The first job is the one that he gets from his mom, who's working at a Turkish bath, and he decides to dress in his full soldier uniform to work in a Turkish bath, and then he looks like he's sweating to death for obvious reasons, because it's a wool fucking uniform.
But it's funny, don't you get it? No, and that's the thing, is like, even when he becomes a gigolo, I'm like, oh, here's where it gets like kind of hot and heavy. But no, it's like these older society women that he's taking around and satisfying or something, and there's nothing sexy about it. There's nothing particularly funny or interesting. I mean, I think I like the idea of this, the Nazi party trying to recruit him, and the head guy is sort of like got a thing for him, and all this other weird stuff. I'm watching it thinking this could have really been something, and I think the problem is Bowie. He's just so miscast and so aloof, and that's just kind of the way he is in movies. I think he looks great. He's got the same problem that Sting had in Dune. He looks the part. You want him to be so amazing and iconic, but then the director yells, "Action!" And you're like, oh dear, what have we done?
Yeah, it's so odd. He's so stiff, and I was looking at when he made this, and what's funny is this is 2 years after The Man Who Fell to Earth, and we talked about that on this show, and he was better in that than in this,
because he was actually playing a space alien.
he was actually playing. He was more fit the part. Yeah, exactly. And this one, as this soldier, I just didn't buy. Well, and he's a soldier that acts like he's seen battle. He was in one battle at the end of the war, and he went into a coma. That's the entire battle experience he seemed to actually have, because he was a lieutenant and he was promoted to the front line. So you get the impression that before that, he was not on the front line. He was just in school and in training. And with it being World War I, it's a little bit less, people are a little less familiar with that war as well. So you're trying to figure everything out. And then there's supposedly some historical things going on. And pardon me, folks, I'm not up on my history exactly, but there's party battles going on in Berlin where you have the workers fighting the Nazi party because the Nazi party was on the rise in Berlin, and you had these beatnik almost type folks who were rebelling against them, or a revolution, because many of them were in denial that the war was actually lost, including our guy as well. At first, anyway, Paul does not admit that the war was lost.
Well, and there's that again, this would have been great in another movie because I love the idea of doing this big funeral march through a cemetery while there's a battle raging on all
Yeah.
around you. Because that was like, oh, that's really clever. But why am I watching it in this film? Because they don't know what to do with it.
Well,
But
and then they
yeah.
play it comedically,
Right,
too.
and that's the thing, is like there's so much. I understand this movie is supposed to be a comedy, but it's just off
Well,
by enough degrees, so it's like I see where they're going, but they need to get a talented comedic director and a better lead actor to really pull this off, and I'd love to see it. I'd love to see a remake of this movie because some of the there's some monologuing here and there talking about like the generations and basically like the spoiled younger generation, and that leading to decadence, which leads to war. It's like that hard times create strong men,
yeah,
soft
yeah.
times create soft men, that thing. So I think it's very relevant and cool, but it's just so clumsily handled here that it's like, ugh, spare
Well,
me.
there's a lot of things that are clumsily handled in this film to where I can see, and it's deemed as a drama, but there's this comedy kind of opening with the major and our lieutenant denying that the Allies, that the war was actually over, and then him showing up with a pig and running around with a pig because people are hungry, so they totally ignore the revolutionary who's protesting in the streets, and they all chase after him because he has a pig and everybody's hungry. And then they have this recurring gimmick of these two society ladies talking about him at like various chapter breaks, almost like, oh, did you
Hmm.
hear what he's doing now? Oh, in their British accent, they're like, oh yes, he's now a gigolo, or now he's working in that beer bottle, or it's like they just randomly show up, and I'm like, is this supposed to be a drama or a comedy? Because you've got a lot of interesting concepts. We've got our soldier who comes back from the war, and again, clumsily, is conservative by a lot, like many of the soldiers were, the German soldiers, to where they frowned upon promiscuous activity. But we're talking, this is the Roaring 20s now. This is 1924. So the Roaring 20s is happening even in Berlin. And he's all like, no, I won't be with you, silly, even though we've been childhood friends and I've had a crush on you. Sorry, you're too promiscuous for me. When she shows up in his bedroom and goes, don't you think I have nice legs? I'm like, dude.
Well, I mean, I don't begrudge him that. I mean, if he doesn't want to be with a promiscuous lady, that's his prerogative,
No,
and he doesn't owe her anything.
no, but I understand what they were trying to go for. They were showing how, conservative, and how he was trying to be, and how he looked down upon that lifestyle. He couldn't even watch his friend Silly do her performance in a rather see-through negligee when she's doing a musical number. He's looking away constantly. But I think what they were trying to go for, it's just so poorly handled. The arc of him thinking that, condemning that lifestyle and everything and debauchery, to being part of it, basically.
Hmm.
But like you said, Bowie is so wooden in this. You don't feel that growth at all, or that change.
Yeah, I mean, was it his father is the older war vet who's been so shell shocked that he's constantly just like,
Yeah,
you know,
it was his father who was in a wheelchair, and he was so shocked by the end of the war that he went into paralysis, basically.
yeah, which is weird because he looked like he'd be his grandfather or something.
Yeah.
But no, that was essentially my expression the entire time I'm watching this movie was just like disbelief. I had a little bit more of a furrowed brow because I kept like looking to see what time it was. But yeah, I don't know. It it's the late 70s, so yeah, you've got this is around the time where you're getting kind of experimental and satirical and stuff, but yeah, there were some real duds too.
Well, again, it's one of those things where there's a lot of interesting ideas. It's just this script and the casting, mainly of Bowie, just doesn't fit. He don't get me wrong, I love Bowie's music, and I think David Bowie's a talented musician in that, and acting, depending on the role, he could be very good in. I think he's miscast in this role.
Oh yeah. I mean, he was said in 1996 around there. He did a movie called Basquiat, which is about
Oh, yeah.
the New York graffiti artist. It was one of Jeffrey Wright's early roles,
Right.
and David Bowie played Andy Warhol, and that was my favorite Bowie performance ever because he was so perfect. Partially because he was so like alien, much like Warhol was, but also because it was a true supporting part. He popped up every once in a while in the movie. It wasn't just like the Warhol show,
Right.
so it really worked. Yeah.
Yeah, and in this one, it's just he can't carry it. He for what this role would require for you to actually get your idea across, you needed someone with a little bit more, pardon my term, I'm not trying to be pretentious at all, but gravitas.
Mhm.
You needed someone, because even he's running with this pig and being chased by people who want the pig to eat, and there's really no emotion on him. He shows up to his childhood apartment floor, and it's been turned into this apartment complex, and his mom's working at, excuse me, at a Turkish bath, and he tries to show some emotion, but even then it's like he's got one note through most of this film, and it's you if you're trying to convey a guy who was conservative, straightforward, walks the good path and everything, soldier, transforming into the gigolo of the what roaring 20s, you needed someone to show some emotion, because when he gets shot at the end, yeah, spoiler rooms, folks. When he gets shot at the end, I'm like, did he just fall, or is he supposed to be dead? I don't know.
I thought the same thing. I rewound. I'm like, I oh yeah, he's dead. They're nudging him and everything. He's just like,
You-
wow.
yeah,
He
and
looked the
and
same
he,
way through the entire rest of the movie, so I couldn't tell.
well, and then it was odd because they came and they said the Nazis shot him, and then his buddies who are the Nazi party show up, and they act surprised that he was dead, and then they said we're going to give him a hero's welcome, and I'm like, who's who in this? Because they were all dressed the same in that battle at night. And again, we do get hints, and in the hands of a better screenplay and director, I think you've got some interesting subplot here in the background of the rise of the Nazi party, because we get that with a group. They show up in their tan outfits with the armbands, and I did some, and fully admit, I Googled, I'm like, how early did the Nazi party start? And I'm like, okay, that fit, because by that time it was 1928. Um, and you would have guys around in tan outfits with the armbands.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. They're showing the buildup of the Nazi party, but that's like the only vision we get. Then we go back to Bowie jumping between ladies, apparently. Uh and then you have an underlying major who has his who's in the closet, basically. who wants our soldier for more than just the cause for the fatherland. But he can't admit it, obviously. Uh, but you've got a lot of interesting ideas that just get abandoned by the wayside, it feels like. To getting back to him pining yet not pining for Silly, and then he's upset because she runs off to Hollywood. She gets an opportunity, and we get the scene where a showgirl who worked with Silly shows up to him and says, "Hey, this is your third night." And he's like, "Oh, I can't understand how Silly would have walked away from me for this opportunity in Hollywood that she literally was telling him about not 3 scenes earlier, that she was really wanted to go to Hollywood. Oh, I can't understand how she left." And the one performer goes, "She didn't give a shit about you, dude."
Yeah.
And he gets barely a look on his face, and I'm like, "Really? That's how we're gonna play this? Really?"
It's weird because I watched this movie like, I don't know, within a day. I was going to say like probably
Yeah.
15 hours ago. And you reminded me of what happened. I'm thankful because I had forgotten about it. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. That did happen. Again, filmnesia. I can't quite explain it.
Well,
Um, but yeah, it reminds me of a movie that came out the year after this, which is called Being There by Hal
mm,
Ashby. And I remember I only watched the movie once and I didn't like it because
mhm,
I read the book, and the book is great political satire. And it's about this guy named Chauncey Gardner, who is essentially, he is a sort of like a blank slate that other people project what they want him to be onto him. So he
mm,
becomes, I think, a very successful like businessman, and he gets into politics and things
right, right.
because people just say he's so aloof that they must agree with him. He'll give like a
Mhm.
subtle nod or like that answer that doesn't make sense. Like, oh, that's so profound. Wow, you really get it. I feel like that's sort of what the filmmakers are trying to go for here with Bowie, but that doesn't quite reach because he is just a charisma vacuum when he's not on stage.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're right. That's the impression I got with it too, is that they were trying to imply, and I thought then before we actually get an hour and 5 minutes into it to where he finally meets the madam played by Marlene Dietrich, who hires him as a gigolo, I'm like, "Oh, here's the gigolo." I thought just a gigolo might have been metaphorical, in that he was a gigolo, in that he just sold himself to the next person for a job or whatnot, and just said whatever the person wanted to believe to sell himself so that he could get paid for the job, or have this relationship, or get this person out of his hair. And I'm like, okay, that'd be interesting. And then I'm like, oh wait, no, they are doing a gigolo. Okay, he is a gigolo, but she paid him and sent him away. But did she hire him and not? And it is so dry. And I don't mind dry British like approach and humor in that, but this is so dry. You're like, what exactly is going on in here? Because it is trying to be so, I don't know, subtle or nuanced to the point of its detriment, I think.
Yeah, and it might just be because of the time it was made. I mean, again, I feel like someone could take this story and really bring something out of it and remake it. This again, filmnesia. So what I'm about to describe might actually be what was going on in this movie. I just completely missed it. But you've got this pretty well off kid becomes an officer in the war, gets blown up, comes home after 3 years. His family, what if they've lost everything? And so this guy of means is now forced to do odd jobs and become a prostitute. And he hates it. And he hates all the people that are hiring because they're all like these high society people that he used to be a part of. But they're not going to give him the money. They're just going to, they'll pimp him out. And
Well,
yet there's this burgeoning party of disaffected people because Germany's broke after World War One. And so there's resentment that fosters up into a political movement. And all of a sudden, this guy catches wind of like, that could be my ticket to, you know, fortune and glory and power.
mhm.
And so he kind of jumps from being a gigolo into this Nazi party that prides itself on, the pure master race and everything, but their poster boy is a literal whore. That's a movie I think that could really have something to say.
That is something, and you could get that movie here if you completely restructured the events that happen in this film. The thing is, one of the other things it doesn't do too well is passage of time. If you didn't have a date that showed up, or if you didn't have someone who say, "Oh, where have you been for months?" you
Yeah.
wouldn't realize that he's been gone. Because when he arrives home and he realizes they're renting out his place, there's a woman who is a sex worker that's renting one of the rooms in their place, in his family's place. His mom's working at a Turkish bath, which has its own connotations. Um, you know, he's really discouraged about what his home life appears to have become. His dad's comatose. He's walking around in this beer bottle. So when he meets this major who takes him down to this subway trade where they have their headquarters, which eventually becomes their headquarters for the Nazi Party movement. These guys are are joining the Nazi Party movement, basically. At least yeah. Um, the soldier showed some life. Bowie actually shows some emotion here, going, "Oh, hey, this guy's still the soldier. No, we didn't lose the war. We're just going to start this movement from this headquarters here," which is fine until the guy's lover, not lover, shows up.
Is that Rolf, I think his name, or something like
Yeah,
that? Yeah.
Otto or
Otto. Yeah.
Otto, I think. Yeah, or Wolf, one of the two. Anyway, it punches him and breaks his nose. He's like, "What the hell?" And so then we cut to a holiday gathering. He shows up and they're like, "Oh, where have you been for months?" And I'm like, "Wait, months?" Like, there was no montage even or any, and I don't need my handheld, but at least a little something to show passage of time, because it just feels like this just happens, and all he's been doing these 4 months or these whatever months that he's been gone is sitting in this train reading, apparently.
Well, here's where I haven't read up on this movie, so it's pure speculation. But maybe this is where our missing 45 minutes comes in, because as we
It
talked
could
about at the
be.
top of the show, this is supposed to be 2 hours and 27 minutes. I guess that's an international cut. But this one, I could see if they trimmed it down to 145, maybe they had to put in those title cards of the years because they cut so much other stuff out that it's like, oh, that really does fill in these passages of time, but you remove that, and it's like, well, where are we, literally,
See,
or when
and
are
that
we?
makes and that makes me wonder, because only in the US the 106-minute version is available. The film itself is actually credited as 2 hours and 27 minutes. And while I know you said that you couldn't probably make it through that, I'm wondering if there's a lot of interesting things that were cut out of it that were either Nazi imagery or discussions or topics, because censorship is weird like that, or other things that they talk out, cut out that they didn't think would be appropriate for American audiences. But I'm curious. I would love to see the European cut of this, in all honesty, because you just feel like you're missing chunks of stuff because it hops so far ahead and people are acting like things have been happening for a while. And you're like, wait, what?
It's kind of like when we talked about Once Upon a Time in America last month or 2 months ago.
Right, right.
How they took that sprawling, like, 4-hour movie or whatever it was, and they released it in the States at, like, under 2 hours or whatever,
Mhm.
however they butchered it. I'm like, I can't even imagine trying to tell that story in half the time.
Yeah, because it's just one of those things where you're seeing so much here that just feels like you're missing. Like, for this buildup of, like, the Nazi Party, it feels like there's supposed to be more there, or the battle that happens in the graveyard. It feels like there was supposed to be more of a setup to why there's this fight in the graveyard. But there's just this random fight, apparently, and then you kind of have to piece together, oh, this is between possibly Nazi Party and Labor Party or whatever, the two different parties or whatnot. you're not quite sure because they don't drop any names of who's fighting who. They're just like, oh, these guys are fighting each other. Quick, run faster. And you get this comedic thing where the funeral procession is trying to run through while there's this battle going on. And then Bowie ends up with the widow of this major that was a person associated with him or just in the army. So he had a respect for him. And they nearly make it, they do make it in the guy's crypt with his body.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's even the line because they're running with the casket and they get into the crypt and they close the crypt and they look, and I think it's Bowie says, oh, well, I guess he did get to die by the bullet because there's a bullet hole in the coffin. And I'm like, what is this?
I don't know. And then later with Silly was her name, very appropriate.
Yeah.
On her wedding night day, they end up sleeping together. One of the was that right?
Yeah. They end up. That's near the end of the film. Here's what's funny is the last like 10 minutes of this movie is more interesting than the first hour and 30 minutes of it because we get movement, we get, you know, Bowie's character showing a little more emotion. We have Silly showing up back from Hollywood. She's going to marry the prince that we were introduced to earlier when he made it with Silly in the prince's mansion. You know, and then you've got the Nazi party guys showing up at the wedding where, you know, and they're all dressed in dark and I mean, there's a lot of interesting kind of pieces moving in the last like 5-10 minutes of this film. He ends up sleeping with Silly, even though it's her wedding night with the prince.
And what the one I think great shot in this movie is they're lying together, you know, mostly naked, and his hand is like draped over her butt.
Yeah.
It almost looks like he's got a finger wedged up in there. But it's just such an interesting composition because there's like these the not palm trees, but like the fronds of this tree.
Yeah.
It's a very weird composition. The screen's almost cut in half. But yeah, I don't know why this energy couldn't have been devoted to the first. You know, like you said, the rest of the movie. I did like the prince in the bathroom or the bathtub or when Bowie's in the bathtub.
Yeah.
Earlier in the film when he first meets him, and Bowie, like the soap slips out of his hand, and the prince like spears it with his cane and gives it back to him, and then gives him his towel the same way. It's very awkward and strange. But yeah, Bowie in this movie ultimately he only feels like he's like 8 years old, trapped in the body of a 22-year-old.
You do, and he's supposed to have aged. Like I said, first we had the 1924 when he finally gets back home, and then by the end of the film we're at 1927. It's like 3 or 4 years. Apparently he's been a gigolo for a while or whatnot. And yeah, he's supposed to have, you know, I imagine he was supposed to be young when he was, because you're at the end of World War I. So he's probably, not more than 20, 21 or so. And so he's like 27 now by, by the time he's, we're near the end of the film. What I just was wondering, and we were just talking about it now, there's an interesting conversation between this prince and, we're just going to call him Bowie. Between the prince and Bowie's character in the bathtub, where he talks about how he's royalty and there's kings in their family, and how some of the brothers killed other brothers because they were sleeping with their mistresses.
Yeah.
And then Bowie looks at him, go, "You're going to kill me, aren't you?" And then the guy just kind of smiles and closes the door. And then we don't see him for an hour till Silly comes back later from Hollywood and decides to marry the guy. And I was just wondering, though, with that setup, I'm wondering if it's the prince who kills Bowie at the end and not the actual Nazi guys who shoot him.
Yeah, the guy was in like white tux and tails at the wedding, and I don't see him getting out in the street and like chasing anybody
or
down.
He had somebody kill
Oh, I
him,
see.
maybe, you know, because they come up weirdly going, "Oh, it was a Nazi that shot him. It was a Nazi." And you're like, why would they shoot him? They've been trying to recruit this guy as the poster boy, you know, but only
I think the answer, I think, is what our, would-be lover says, is that, we're gonna make him a symbol of the party whether he wanted it or not.
right, right.
So I think I think the Nazis did kill him, and I think they were
Mm,
trying to pin it on the people that they were fighting.
right.
It's again, maybe there's missing footage, but it's so clumsily handled because Bowie is literally just, I had to rewind this part like twice because there's this long shot of him just like walking down this series of cobblestone streets in the dark, and then all of a sudden there's like people running and there's like a bad cut. I'm like, what is going on here? I get that they're trying to the chaos of everyone kind of like looks there aren't people in clashing uniforms you can easily identify, so it could be anybody that killed him. But just as a viewer, I'm like, I need more than this.
Yeah, and again, another prime example, you mentioning it, the footage, those are the most interesting shots in this film is when he's walking down the cobblestone, the way they're shot. I mean, they were interesting. Just before he dies, obviously foreshadowing, he turns and he walks upstairs where there's this golden light coming down and there's these hard shadows where he's coming from. And you're like, oh, he's going to die here somehow. But even with that, at least that was visually interesting too. Up until that point, we don't really get shots like that. It's all a lot of medium and close-ups and things that you're just like, "Oh, everything feels claustrophobic." Yeah, and
I feel like Bowie was expected to do a lot of heavy lifting. Like, he's so interesting to look at. That's got to give the picture itself some kind of charisma, and it just doesn't.
yeah, and that's the thing is there isn't charisma there. And pulling up some trivia quick, apparently David Bowie disliked this film. He did in an interview at New Music Express. He said, "Oh well, we've all got to do one bad movie, and hopefully have done mine now."
I wonder, did it say, because I had heard that he had disowned this too, but did he disown the theatrical, like the American version, or the longer one? Did it say?
It doesn't say which one, so he just says he disliked the film. So it could be both. I mean, it could
Mm.
just be that. Bringing it around back to Marlene Dietrich, she got paid $250,000 for 2 days of work.
And this is 1978 money.
This is 1978 money. So, in our tradition of
Yay!
we've been doing this all year. Why stop now? In 2024, that is wow. $1.2 million for 2 days of work for 2024 money.
Wow.
Basically 2024 it'd be the equivalent of getting paid $600,000 for 2 days of work. That's like Sean Connery during Highlander money right there. That's what that's what that is. Highlander 2 money. That's crazy that
Yeah.
she got paid that much because, and what's also interesting is this was shot in Berlin. It was financed by Berlin. The only person from Berlin in the film is Marlene Dietrich.
Oh yeah, they probably shot it like down the block from her apartment or something like that. She's like, yeah, sure. I got nothing else going on.
We don't even have to pay for a trailer. Her house is literally down the street. She just walks down the street. Okay, let's shoot this fucking thing. Because she gets two scenes too. She gets the scene where she, I guess, hires, our main man. And then she gets to sing Just a Gigolo, the song which was written, I believe, by David Bowie.
Well, and her part reminded me, and no disrespect, but I remember years ago when Bruce Willis was doing all these like terrible directed, streaming
Yeah.
movies, and it was like usually him sitting in a diner or he was a cop just sitting behind a desk, and he was in the movie for 5 minutes and he delivered his lines like he couldn't care less. And we're like, wow. But now, knowing what we know now about his condition, we were a bit more understanding. But watching this, I'm like, okay, Marlene Dietrich, she had 2 scenes, one of which she's just sitting in a chair. And a lot of it is like cutting to the people around, like watching her talk to David Bowie. And she just has to kind of deliver this speech. She does it very well. But then
Oh
the other
yeah.
thing is she's singing. She's not, I don't remember her moving around very much. She's
No, she
just
doesn't
like,
move around much. She's mostly singing because our hero, our quote unquote hero, Paul, shows back up. He doesn't want to be. He's trying to fight being a gigolo, so he's just sitting there. Oh, it was after he left the one rich woman, because he gets hired as a gigolo. He hooks up with the widow. He ends up hanging with the widow. The widow wants him to be kind of her arm candy, more or less, dressing him up. And he's like, yeah, no, thank you. And she's like, oh, okay. And then he leaves, and then he goes to the bar, and it's just a gigolo. And Marlene Dietrich's Baroness sings, because he's sitting in this, in the I guess the brothel location off hours, lamenting his life choices, I think.
you're talking about Bowie or Paul? Um, no,
One in the same. No, yeah. Both of them. Both of David Bowie is projecting through Paul, going, what the hell did I get myself into?
did was it just me, or when you first heard Marlene Dietrich's character referred to as the Baroness, did you immediately think, oh, we're gonna get some GI Joe action in here?
Man,
Like, that'd be awesome.
think about it, though. The way Marlene Dietrich is, back in the day, if they had GI Joe from the 80s, back in the 50s, Marlene Dietrich could have totally played the Baroness. She would have been an awesome Baroness, because she had both the sex appeal and just the the really kind of stern attitude and edge that you would want for the Baroness. She totally could have played the Baroness.
Yes.
Oh man, now I want to see that. Well, who would have played Cobra? So that would have been
Oh, Cobra Commander?
Commander, yeah.
Peter Lorre. No,
Peter Lorre would be Cobra Commander. Who would be Destro then? Because Destro had a thing for Cary Grant.
I was just gonna say, because yeah, we got that whole connection going. Oh man, someone needs to. They have those super Panavision trailers they make with AI on YouTube.
Yes,
They need to go. They need to make Cobra for the 1940s with
Marlene
Lori
Dietrich
and
Cary
Grant.
Grant. Oh my god.
Can you imagine Cary Grant's face as a metal mask?
He'd be up for it too. That's the thing, is he could do it too. Man, my Marines, we're going. Yes, we're talking about just a gigolo yet, but we just recast and made a 40s version of G.I. Joe. There you go.
I'm watching the entire movie in my head, and that could go for 2 hours and 27 minutes.
That could. I'm serious now. I can't unsee her not being the Baroness. I want to see that so bad now. But this movie, you're right. It's one of those things where if this movie is made earlier or later, I think it's done better. But in 78, that mid 70s, like 75 to 80 was a weird time for films, even earlier 70s, but definitely getting into the 74, 75 films, and then to 1980. It's just this weird time, because that's when you were starting to get those crime procedurals too, the gritty kind of crime films as well, that weren't horror, but they were kind of thrillers, but they were kind of horror. But
thinking of like Nighthawks,
yeah, like when we talked about Nighthawks, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's so to do a period piece, a World War I period piece. I just with Bowie cast. I don't know why, and I couldn't find trivia on why they would have picked Bowie for this role, because he is not suited for it. Nothing against him. This is just not the role for him.
I could see why they would offer it to him, because it's David Bowie. Maybe someone slipped in the script and he was interested. Maybe he thought it would be a fun acting challenge or an
Sure.
exercise or a free trip to Germany and hang out with Marlene Dietrich for a couple afternoons. But yeah, why no one stepped in and said, "Oh, we've made a mistake" on like day 2 when they saw the dailies? That's still beyond me. I don't know.
And and we've got another case here where the people around him are acting their asses off, in all honesty. Even Marlene Dietrich with the speech she gives, either the speech she gives or Sydney Rome as Silly. I liked the Silly character. I wanted more interaction between actually her and Paul in some way, at least, because she really kind of knew how Paul was, but still was kind of pushing it aside and still trying to break through his shell or whatnot. And I liked the Silly character. I liked the widow who kind of fell for him, or at least, pull him in. She was an interesting character. The major who was becoming the head of their branch of the Nazi party, he was you had all these interesting characters revolving around your main character, but unfortunately, this cut of the film is so focused on him that it just, it brings the film down. And yeah, they label it drama on IMDb, but I'm coming back to it because there's literally a comedic moment with our Nazi party guys who are about to launch the revolution into Berlin. They've gathered guides, they've gathered weapons, they're doing the speech. And this guy's the general, our captain's doing the monologuing, and then he's got his buddy behind him who has to tell the guys how to answer because he asks them a question
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're all silent. And then his buddy behind him goes, "Yes." And then everyone goes, "Yes." And then yes. And then they say no. And they mean yes, or no, they say yes again, and we were supposed to say no. So there's a comedic moment. And then someone shoots the ammunition pile they have, and it blows things up. And the one guy goes, they're a bunch of idiots. And I'm like, if this is supposed to be drama, this is not, you're not doing it well.
No.
This is, yeah,
It's someone at IMDb not paying attention.
it's gotta be someone who just listed this older film and said, "Oh yeah, no, we'll put it in this category."
Well, that's the thing is, like, with IMDb, I've seen drama and I've seen comedy, but I don't know if I've ever seen a dramedy tag, because
There should
that's
be a
what,
dramedy tag. Yeah.
because this is not strictly a comedy. It's not strictly a drama. I mean, it's bad, but I think if anything, this would that label would come close.
I did like how they credited Marlene Dietrich with saying, "With great pride, Marlene
Yeah.
Dietrich," that they casted. But even the credit sequence, I will tell you, when I started watching the opening credit sequence, I was like, "Oh no." Because this opening credit sequence is even for 1978 is a bit janky. It's like
Yeah.
made for TV movie like quality
It's like
credits.
floating green text. I don't know what's going on there.
And again, being a drama, it yet still ends. You literally so we have our main guy who gets killed, and they say, "Hey, we're going to use his body for promoting the Nazi party." So he's in the casket. They've dressed him up as a Nazi. He has Nazi soldiers all around his casket in the room. His dad's there. His mom shows up. She's kind of in denial. And then suddenly the dad moves as they're wheeling the old man out. Suddenly he's moved to look back at his son. And you could have ended it there. But then we go back again to the gimmick of the two socialites talking, and it pans up and the end. And I'm like, wait, what?
Did you expect more at this point, Mark? I mean, the
No,
movie told you what it was.
no, I didn't. But it's one of those where there are a lot of elements in here that just you had the opportunity to really make an interesting story with weaving a plot of an ex-soldier becoming a gigolo and the rise of the Nazi party during the mid to late 20s. There's a lot you could do with this. And instead, no, we've got this guy maybe pining for his girl love, but not really. And yeah, I really I tried. I tried with the no, I am told I'm soft on films, and on this one, I am sorry, but I can't. This movie, I can't really recommend it because the highlight was seeing Marlene Dietrich in her last screen role because she actually is acting and delivers her monologue, and getting to see her sing, and knowing it's her last on-screen appearance, it has a little bit of meaning. And those last like 5-10 minutes of the movie, that's all you need to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it's a predicament for me because I didn't hate it.
No,
I mean, I'm ambivalent. I mean,
it
again, Filmnesia. Like, I know I watched it. I know I keep a spreadsheet of like all the movies I watch because I'm a nerd. So I think this time next year I'll be looking. Oh, what did I watch last year? Just a Gigolo. What was that? And I'll probably come back and like, Mark, did we watch a movie something about sex worker or something like that? And like you're like, oh, it was the Bowie thing. I'm like, oh, that's right.
it if you want, if you look up in the dictionary, and you've heard people say it, and some people have even said it here, it's a movie that's there. Or as my son goes, "Well, that movie exists." That's what Just a Gigolo is. It's a movie that's there. I didn't hate it either, but at the end of it, you're going, "What was the real purpose of this film? What are you trying to actually say?" I kind of know what it's trying to say, but it does it so haphazardly, and it stumbles on itself so much that at least this cut of it, you're just like, "Okay, well, I watched that, and I didn't hate it, but at the same time, I'm like, I have absolutely no feelings about this film, whatsoever, outside of trying to dissect what they were going for, and it's hard to find. It really is.
Were you ever in the Boy Scouts?
No, I was not.
Cub Scouts?
No, I was not.
Okay. You're familiar with the concept of the merit badge, right?
I do know the merit badges and the whole thing because I had friends who were into that. I just wasn't.
Right. I was in Scouts for a little while, and to earn your merit badge, you had to do like, this is 35 years ago, so my memory is a little hazy, but you had to do like 10 activities related
Right.
to a certain badge, and some was like, oh, you write an essay, or you go out and you collect some sticks and make them into a collage or some nonsense. This movie felt like the bottom tier of what you have to do to get your merit badge. Like you said, I watched it. That's like the achievement, achievement unlocked. I watched the movie. I had no reaction to it, but I did it. Now I can move on to the next thing that actually counts for something.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say I hated it. I'm not going to say it. I wasted. There were interesting things, but I like as I think you used the perfect word, indifferent. This cut of the film leaves you indifferent, which makes me wonder, which I almost want to seek out, not right away, but I maybe next year, I want to seek out the longer cut only because I want to see what was cut, because I have a feeling there's at least some character things in there that are probably out because maybe those happen during some more salacious moments in the film.
I'll give you a bigger break. Just wait 4 years because this movie, 1978, it'll having its 50th anniversary in a few years.
It
So
will.
some boutique label is going to come out and it's like, oh, here's the full international cut on 4K, so you can watch that and we can discover if there's anything to that missing 45 minutes.
Yeah, Yeah, because I have a feeling there's stuff missing because this feels like almost like an incomplete film. Like there's these ideas that don't really go too many places, and it doesn't help for your lead, who really is wooden throughout most of it. Um, and I I don't really think that's the fault of Bowie so much as possibly how he was directed and the
Mhm.
fact that this is like you've heard me joke about it before, folks, maybe if you've listened to the show at all. John Wayne is Genghis Khan. This is like casting John Wayne as Genghis Khan, which happened. Look it up, Google it, younger folks out there. And that's what this feels like. He is not a person to be playing an ex-soldier or a soldier. He just did not sell any of it. There was no emotion coming through. Uh, I felt a little bit like I was watching Paul Mescal from Gladiator 2. Oh, did I say that? Oh.
A movie I'll never watch.
Um
Um,
yeah, no, yeah, it's there if you're a Marlene Dietrich fan and you want to see her last screen appearance. If you're a David Bowie fan, maybe this might be of interest, but unless you I think you can get the longer cut, at least maybe get some more of this film. This version really, I don't know, I've got nothing really. I can't recommend it. What about you?
Same. I mean, yeah. It's a fascination if you're a Bowie completist and you're like, oh wow, he made this really weird World War One drama about being a gigolo. I'm like, yeah, you go watch it. Tell me what you think. But otherwise, there's just keep on passing by. It's on Prime for free, so
Yeah,
if
if
you're
you
so
got
inclined, you
Prime,
can
yeah.
watch it. But yeah,
Yeah, if you got Prime, you can watch it. And that's probably the best way to watch this. And yeah, sorry to end she's Dietrich-iest on a flat note, especially considering what we started with. But there you have it, folks. We've put our November episode to bed now. We have 4 at least episodes to go in a year, and next month will be Oh Nurse Month, where we're looking at 4 films that have nurse in the title. And next week will be a horror film because why not? Yes, I know it's the holidays, but it's always room for horror, where we're going to be looking at Nurse, or Nurse 3D as it was titled. In fact, next month, 3 of the 4 films will have been released from 2000 or sooner.
oh,
Yeah, it's a rare thing, but I picked some newer films to close out the year, and our final pre-code film will be Night Nurse, and that's how we're going to end the year on is Night Nurse. And next week, for Nurse, or Nurse 3D, we will be starting a little earlier. Check out the Facebook page or keep up to where the earlier start time is going to happen, so we can get 1 or 2 other crew members from our East Coast in on the show. So, with that, a license to shill, my friend, Mr. Ian Simmons. Thank you for taking this journey and not running screaming from this film, and saying screw you, Mark. Yeah, I'm gonna go, watch Freddy Got Fingered again. So
anytime, every time. No, here's the thing, Mark. You have to be awake in order to run screaming from anything, and that just
that's
was
true.
not the case.
That is
Oh.
very true. So, sir, license to shill is yours. What do you got for my listeners?
Well, I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com and also right here on YouTube. And I'm also here every Monday talking about movies with Mark, movies of all kinds. Some great. I was thinking about this. I don't know where you would put. It's unfortunate that we had to end such a great month of Marlene Dietrich movies on this one. I'm
Yeah,
glad we watched it because it's an interesting, inclusion of her in this film. But like, damn, why couldn't this been like number 2 or something? I wouldn't want to put it as number 1 because I don't want people to get like the wrong impression. They start off with the first and you're like, oh, we got to watch a month of this. No, it's great. A lot of great movies in here. We just unfortunately ended with this kind of turkey.
Yeah, and that's the thing, folks, is we try to cover films on here that we may, or at least I, may not have seen before, because that's part of my motivation for doing this show is to discover some of these films. Though next year, as you know, it'll be Over the Hill a year. Our special series next year, at least one episode a month will be a film from 1975, the year I was born. Because I turned 50 next year. So I was like, hey, let's look at some of those 1975 films. They were voted on by our listeners. And yeah, there'll be at least one each month next year. I've already got next year's planned out. Next month is our own nurse month. And yeah, that's about it. Check out Ian's stuff. Check out all the other stuff at specialmarkproductions.com. We got a new interview posted on the YouTube here where I got to interview the main subject and the director of an interesting paranormal documentary called It's Coming. So it's definitely an interesting discussion for an interesting documentary that if you're into the paranormal or ghosts or hauntings at all, you may want to check it out. So until next time, folks, we'll just say a good night, everyone.
Good night.